Hello everyone. So I decided to use Canva, which is an online poster creator, which is really cool, for my Bringing It All Together Module 8 discussion. First of all, I just wanted to say that I think technology is such a relevant thing these days, especially for our students, and that is one of the reasons why I'm taking this master's program. So learning about all this technology online is really interesting for me, and I think it's a great way to apply everything that I've learned in the classroom and get kids excited about using technology and hopefully be able to help them get ready for their future and technology careers. My philosophy in online teaching. So first, I think it is vital that you start by building a community in your online class. Rice describes community building in any classroom that needs to start from day one and provide continuous process that can be encouraged by providing opportunities for learners to engage in social dialogue with their classmates. He also gave some suggestions, which would be establishing a forum called a student lounge for students to socialize with their peers freely, and also establish a discussion called Think Tank so students can pose questions and have them answered by classmates. Those are just two ways that Rice suggests building a community, but I also think it's really important that students feel comfortable talking to one another. They feel comfortable with the teacher, and they know that communication is open from day one, that you can talk to them about anything and they can talk to you about everything. So that's the first thing I think that is super important for an online classroom. Along with that is collaboration. Building collaboration is really the foundation of an effective online classroom. With that, Rice describes if you have a good collaboration, then you can also increase engagement and you can improve cooperation among learners, increase commitment to group goals, increase flow of information, and satisfaction in group interactions. So it really provides great outcomes if you have good collaboration in your online classroom. I also think it's equally important to provide students with clear expectations. So showing them examples and providing rubrics and syllabuses that they will be graded on so students know exactly what is expected of them and so that they can complete the assignment without any flaws. I also think along with the clear expectations, you need to set reasonable goals for them. This way students stay motivated. If a goal is set too high or too low, students lose engagement and motivation. So those reasonable goals are really important, and I personally like making small reasonable goals instead of making a huge goal at one time. And lastly, I really believe in timely and precise feedback. When we give feedback precisely and timely, students are more motivated to complete assignments and do well in schooling. I know that we've all been there when a professor or a teacher hasn't graded your test for weeks and it's just killing you to see what grade you got. Then you're kind of not motivated. You don't know what your grade is, and you're really not as motivated as if you know you got 100%. Then you want to keep doing well. So I think giving timely and precise feedback is super important online, especially since you're not meeting face to face. The teacher role for me, I think, online, they really need to act as the facilitator. In an article that I read, which I posted a link to on the bottom right-hand corner, called From Teacher to Facilitator, it explains how when we facilitate instead of directly teach all the time, students really become more responsible for their own learning. Some ways to do this would be to simply make instruction relevant for students. This way they're engaged in their learning and they understand why they're learning it, and they'll take more responsibility in their learning. We also want to be a supporter and a cheerleader for our students, and this goes hand to hand. I think today it's really important that we teach our students our growth mindset, that our brains have the capability to grow, and that all students can learn. I know that in my classroom, I really push that. You can do it. And part of this is praising the process and not necessarily the answer. So I think that's also important to remember. As a teacher, we need to be praising. And part of our role is supporting our students and encouraging them, even when they feel like they can't do it or something is frustrating or difficult for them. One math unit that I might teach online would be multiplication. The reason I chose this unit was for a bunch of different reasons, and I would probably do this as like a blended classroom or flipped classroom type online lesson. So the reason I would pick math specifically and multiplication, is because one, there's so many great online resources for students that they can work on different multiplication facts and fluency independently online. And also, it's something that once it's taught, it's really just mastering these facts. So practicing and making sure that these facts are relevant to students. I think that math is one of the subjects that require the most differentiation, especially in my classroom. And I think that doing something online would really allow me to differentiate groups by making maybe different breakout rooms, like we learned about, and using different resources to help different leveled students. Another thing with the differentiation would be students could self-pace. So they would be able to move on if they're ready, or they would be able to watch videos over again if they needed some extra help. And one of the reasons that I would do this with a flipped classroom or blended learning would be it would also give me as the teacher more time to meet with the needy individuals. So I could spend more time hands-on with students, making sure they understood the material. And on the flip side of that, I could spend more time with students who might be ready for that extra enrichment and extra push. So for these reasons, I would pick personally a math unit, and I think multiplication would be a great start to do a unit online. Some different asynchronous tools or delayed time tools and synchronous tools, which would be real-time tools that I would use, are listed here. I really utilized Rice's chart on page 109 and 110, as well as the chart on 106 and 107 to help me formulate this list. So some of the delayed time tools I would use would be discussion forums for students to post questions and kind of make that sense of community. So students could post questions about the course, or they could also post questions to other students at any time. So I would also use email for a sense of communication. This would be to students, to parents, and it would really just be open communication between everyone involved in the process. And then screencast, I think I would also use that. And one way I would use this would be to check for student understanding. So if they could teach somebody else through a screencast, then I would really know that they mastered the content. Some real-time tools that I would use would be chat. I would use this as participation in an online classroom, especially math. So when I did my virtual classroom 10-minute lesson, ideally I wanted to use the chat box for students to answer and respond to one another. I kind of had to use a whiteboard because I couldn't figure it out, but that's what I would use it for. And then, of course, the web conference. I really liked Zoom, so I could definitely see myself using that, or also Google Hangout. So I would also use that for real time. Some of the collaboration tools, and these kind of double dip in areas, but one that I would use to demonstrate mastery in this would be student-led discussion. So I do that a lot in my classroom, and I would also do that online, really making the students be in control of the discussion and having other students compliment on each other's and discuss each other. So I wouldn't really chime in, I'd let the students do that. Shared resource, I would definitely start my lessons with icebreakers. I'd want to create that community and collaboration between students. For brainstorming, I would do live chat and video conferencing, which I kind of talked about up top a little bit. And then reflection, again, I would do that screencast or learning log so students could quickly jot down something that they've learned after each lesson or each day. Special considerations is a huge part of online learning. You want to ensure that you make online learning equally available to every student regardless of their needs. First of all, you definitely need to check if any of your students have IEPs, 504s, or GIEPs, because these are all legal documents, so you need to make sure you're doing what they're asking you to do. The first thing I looked at was accessibility, and I use the Online Accessibility Handbook, which is a great tool online, and this really made me aware of how my documents could be more accessible for students with disabilities. For example, doing simple things like adding the text option to pictures so students who had a visual impairment could understand what the picture was a great option that I didn't even know were available. All of the items on these lists were super easy to implement and would help that student excel in your online class. On page 222 in my Rice book, I also looked at different tools that could help you if you had students who were struggling in content areas. So content area for ELA, some of the strategies you might want to use are to define vocab and the highlighter tool, and you could do this through Skills Tutor or Raz Kids. In history, you would want to make sure that you're using the note-taking strategy. You could do this through Google Notes. And in science, you'd want to have virtual hands-on labs, and you could do this through the document camera. Lastly, I looked at the UDL Principles, which is online, the Center Online, which is also a great resource. And there's Universal Design for Learning. That's what UDL stands for. And they really harp on having 3 things on your online courses. So multiple means of representation, multiple means of expressing your understanding on information, and then multiple means of engagement. And if you have those 3 principles in your online session, then you can ensure students with special considerations will really be getting the most out of your class. You also want to keep in mind for students with visual impairments, hearing impairments, mobility impairments, or language and speech impairments, different things that you could use for them, such as text-to-speech or a light signal alert, little things like these, and the chart on page 228 and 229 in Rice is very beneficial. The biggest 2 aha moments I've had were how simple it is to differentiate using online instruction. Just by making breakout rooms or even virtual groups, you can really differentiate to meet individual needs. I also never really thought from the student perspective how much better the pacing would be from an online class. Students can simply rewatch videos if they don't understand the material, or if they're ready to move ahead, they can do that as well. So those were 2 really big aha moments that I had, and I think that online learning really helps these 2 areas. Questions I still have are time management. I still think it's really difficult to manage time online. What happens if you run out of time and your students still aren't understanding content? You can't just go into social studies time to keep teaching. You can't always go back to it the next day. So that's something I struggle with if students aren't mastering the material. When do you move on, and when do you kind of need to go back and recover that material? I also think you really need to be careful because it's not for everybody. Like I said before, I definitely have students in my class who would not be good at online learning because simply they really aren't good with technology and it frustrates them. You also need to be careful because not everyone has access to this, so I think that that's something important to keep in mind. Overall, I think online learning can be really, really beneficial when it's implemented properly and when it is used effectively from the teacher standpoint, and the teacher acts as a facilitator and guides learning rather than teaching directly.